Okay, so what we're gonna talk about today is the topic of Elvis Presley with the new movie coming out. I'm here to debunk a myth when a lot of people say that Elvis is racist and that he stole rock and roll music. First off, Elvis Presley did not steal anything, and he admits that he didn't steal he didn't create rock and roll. Elvis Presley was a student of music. He studied music. He studied and lived among black blues singers and gospel singers and that. Elvis grew up in a black community. He went to church where he was exposed to gospel. You know, Elvis would often when he moved to Memphis, he would go to Bell Street and watch and learn all of the people, the colored folks down there. That's where he got his style from. That's where he got his dance and his whole style from Bell Street. Elvis openly admits this. If anyone actually does their research, he openly admits this, that he is not the king of rock. He did not invent it. He did not invent it. He got his style from being amongst blacks, growing up in a black community, going to a black church, singing in a black choir in the gospel church. He openly admits all of this. And okay, so if you're a white person growing up amongst blacks, then the type of music you're going to listen to or sing is going to be what's coming from the area of where you're living. For instance, Eminem is a white person who grew up in Detroit amongst black people listening to rap, so he raps. Elvis Presley is a white person living amongst blacks in Mississippi and in Memphis listening to rock and roll, so he did rock and roll.
Our first racial encounter was when we went to Texas. Elvis was told by his people that, well, you can leave the black girls home. You don't have to bring them. So Elvis wasn't going to do the Astrodome unless his girls could be with him. And he demanded that we be given the star treatment. We had to be in our convertible where everybody could see us, and our little blonde could drive us. And that was his statement. You don't like it? Deal with it, or I'm not going to be there.
Why do so many black people dislike Elvis Presley? Elvis borrowed from the music of lesser known black rhythm and blues artists that he heard as a teenager, like Big Mama Thornton. You ain't nothing but and Big Joe Turner. I did shake, rattle, and roll. Shake, rattle, and roll. Shake, rattle, and roll. Shake, rattle, and roll. When white artists cover the music of lesser known black artists, there's always the danger of being accused of cultural appropriation. The blues music that Elvis and a lot of other rock and rollers borrowed from was created and performed by black artists who were relegated to a genre that was known as race music. In the early part of the 20th century, this was how the powers that be classified black music that was deemed to be unsuitable to be played on mostly white mainstream radio. These black artists never got the chance to be heard by larger audiences and earn the kind of money that Elvis and other artists who copied them did. But was Elvis an avowed racist who claimed to have invented rock and roll? Actually, no. Elvis was quoted in a 1957 article in Jet magazine as saying he didn't invent rock and roll and nobody could sing the music like black people. Whenever anyone called him the king of rock and roll in his presence, he shunned the title. But a rumor began circulating in 1957 that he said, quote, "The only thing Negroes can do for me is buy my records and shine my shoes." The only problem is, he never said that. A popular black publication, Jet magazine, attempted to verify the validity of this rumor at the time, but they never could. He supposedly made the statement on Edward R. Murrow's Person to Person program, but he never even appeared on that show. Those who knew him said that this would have been completely out of character for him, but the rumor persisted and hounded him for the rest of his life. B.B. King, Little Richard, Jackie Wilson, James Brown, and Muhammad Ali all expressed their admiration for him, not only as an artist, but as a human being. As to the issue of cultural appropriation,
So that claim was false. Elvis Presley was not a racist by any shape or form, and the accusation that a lot of people go off of, it's been debunked as false. He was never even on the show.
Fast forward to May 2021, when legendary musician and producer Quincy Jones accused the king of another character flaw, and a familiar one: racism. Specifically, Jones claimed that he and another musician refused to work with Elvis because of that racism. When The Hollywood Reporter asked the 88-year-old Jones if he had ever worked with Elvis, Jones said, quote, "No, I wouldn't work with him." When asked why, Jones explained, "I was writing for Tommy Dorsey, oh God, back then in the 50s, and Elvis came in, and Tommy said, I don't want to play with him. He was a racist mother. I'm gonna shut up now." But every time I saw Elvis, he was being coached by Otis Blackwell, telling him how to sing. So is there any truth to Jones's claim? That's impossible to answer, as the alleged event happened 70 years ago, and 2 of the 3 people who were in the room that day have been gone for decades. As for Jones's claim about Otis Blackwell coaching Elvis, Blackwell, who wrote Presley's hit song Don't Be Cruel, told David Letterman during an interview in 1984 that he never even met Elvis, so Jones may be somewhat mistaken.
Now, did you ever meet Elvis Presley?
No, I never met Elvis.
Blackwell did, however, confirm to Letterman that Elvis openly imitated his singing style on Don't Be Cruel, so Jones was right about that part. According to David Pilgrim, curator of Ferris University's Jim Crow Museum, there's just no hard evidence out there that Presley was a racist, despite persistent decades-long rumors to the contrary. Pilgrim notes that Presley donated money to black causes, attended predominantly black churches during his youth in Tupelo, Mississippi, and consistently treated the black people he encountered with respect. On the other hand, Quincy Jones is far from the first person to accuse Elvis Presley of racism. Rap legend's Public Enemy called Presley straight-up racist in their 1989 song Fight the Power.
Okay, so Elvis, he did not invent rock and roll, and he didn't steal it from black people. So what did he do? Elvis was innovative, popular, influential, and a great performer, but he didn't invent anything. By the time Elvis showed up at Sun Records, numerous of other performers like Ike Turner, Ruth Brown, Ray Charles, Big Mama Thornton, and Fats Domino had already released rock and roll songs. Nor did Elvis make the music popular. While rock was black music with a limited profile among white audiences, by the early 1950s it was achieved widespread success. The vocal group Dominoes, led by whatever that word is, talented Clyde McPather, scored a major pop crossover hit with 60 Minute Man. Okay, Elvis and Sam Phillips didn't have to guess that rock and roll by black artists had crossover potential. They just need to look at what the kids of every race was listening to. So Presley wasn't an innovator, he was simply chasing a trend. Elvis was not actually a white man playing black music, but the belief that he was is part of his appeal. So Elvis's whole appeal was that when you listened to him, you wouldn't know that he was white. You would think that he was black. You were surprised when you finally seen him to discover that he was actually white. You know, for a white person to use a black person's style and then put it forth to white people, you know, that's amazing. They do the same thing today. Like that's the same thing that they've done with Eminem. Eminem Eminem just made white people feel more okay to accept rap and hip hop because he was doing it. Okay. In reaction to the transparently false claim that Elvis invented rock and roll, an equal and opposite meme holds that Elvis stole rock from its original black performers. That put a white face on black music and then unjustly profited from white America's cluelessness and racist marketing preferences. But again, looking at the actual landscape of 50s rock and roll, this narrative doesn't really work. In the first place, Elvis was not the first white rock roll was not the first white rock and roll star. Bill Haley had already recorded the original song Crazy Man Crazy in 1953. His version's Rock Around the Clock was recorded a couple months before Elvis' famous Sun session. Moreover, white performances in the hillbilly boogie tradition like Moon, Mullican, and the Maddox Brothers and Rose had long been making music strongly influenced by the beat and spirit of R&B. Nor was this influence one way. Rock and roll performers like Ray Charles and Chuck Berry were fans of and strongly influenced by country music. Black performers regularly performed songs by white songwriters like Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. Some even covered country hits, especially at King Records, where African American producer Henry Glover oversaw both R&B and country divisions. Rock and roll wasn't black music. It wasn't white music. It was an integrated form drawing from other integrated forms including country blues, R&B, boogie woogie, jump blues, western swing, and more. America's pop music marketing categories are often shamefully segregated, but the music itself has never been. So Elvis Presley, he got famous off of he was covering songs from lesser known black rock and roll artists like Big Mama Thornton and such. When he would cover these songs, he would gain popularity amongst the white community because they had never heard these songs by the black artist who he was covering. So they would think that Elvis made this song when all actuality he didn't. He was just covering the song. So he ended up getting popular off of that. So he didn't steal, he was just covering these songs. And he admits that. Like everyone knows that. And it was also the other way around. Like they said, even some of the black artists would sample or cover white hillbilly songs or white country songs, and to blacks they would think that they invented it, but that's just how it is. Elvis Presley never says that he invented rock and roll. Nowhere has he ever said that. So what's special about Elvis then? He wasn't the first person to play rock and roll. He wasn't the first white person to play rock and roll. He didn't make rock and roll popular. He invented nothing and popularized nothing. It's true. He was an extremely talented performer whose early records, especially, are original, exciting, and hugely influential. But you could say the same for the work of contemporary performers like Eddie James, Jackie Wilson, Laverne Baker, Sam Cooke, Ray Charles, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Rosetta Thorpe, and Howlin' Wolf. Elvis was great, but he wasn't greater than a host of other rock and roll greats. Why do we call him king exactly? There seems to be a couple of answers. First, Elvis is the king because he's the king. It's whatever that word is. A combination of talent, being the right color, physical attractiveness, and being in the right place at the right time meant he achieved massive, ridiculous popularity. That is it. That is why they call him the king, not because he created rock and roll. Pop enthusiasms are by their nature unpredictable and a bit random. If things had been a little different, it could have been Buddy Holly or Bill Haley who captured the national imagination, and Variety would be posting headlines about how one or the other of them invented rock and roll. Okay, so according to BB King, well, first let's go here. Elvis Presley's quoted saying, "The Lord messed up with me in two ways. He didn't make me black, and he didn't make me a bass singer." Quote by Michael Arch. A lot of people in retrospect attacked Elvis for stealing the black music and making it white. I say Elvis Presley had a black soul with a white face. This is what B.B. King said. I don't think Elvis ripped him off. I think once something has been exposed, anyone can add or take from it if they like. He was just so great, so popular, and so hot, and so anything that he played became a hit. To me, they didn't make a mistake when they called him king. All the black artists of the day loved Elvis. And Elvis did get a lot of respect from the artists in his day because Elvis always paid homage to the lesser known rock and roll artists who he covered, who he got his style from. He would always pay homage. Presley's music was popular in the black community and noted by Michael Bertrand, author Race, Rock, and Elvis. Between April 1956 and September 1958, Presley had 22 songs among the top 15 on Billboard's rhythm and blues charts that were meant to capture the taste of black listeners and buyers. A lot of people that accuse Elvis of stealing the black man's music, said soul singer Jackie Wilson, when in fact almost every black solo entertainer copied his stage mannerism from Elvis. Sad and misguided stereotypes of Elvis began in the 1950s when Elvis hit it big and was nicknamed the King of Rock and Roll. So when he got dubbed as the King of Rock and Roll, that's when a lot of people felt emotional and felt that that wasn't true. When in all actuality, Elvis, like we said, Elvis, he's just the one who brought rock and roll over to white listeners. So to them, he was the king of rock and roll. But as we said, heard earlier in the video, he admitted over and over again that he was not the king of rock and roll. He wasn't the best at playing it, and nor did he invent it. However, as shown in a 1957 interview in the Jet magazine, Elvis was always the first to give credit to the black community. We already read this before, we'll read it again. A lot of people seem to think that I started this business, but rock and roll was here a long time before I came, Elvis told Jet's Louis Robinson. Nobody can sing that kind of music like colored people. Let's face it, I can't sing. I can't sing it like Fats Domino can. But I always liked that kind of music. I used to go to the colored churches when I was a kid, like Reverend Brewster's church, Herbert Brewster of East Trigg Avenue Baptist Church in Memphis. Presley's genius was the ability to mix multiple styles of music from white and black cultures. Early in his career, a Memphis columnist summarized Presley's singing style. He was a white voice, sings with a Negro rhythm, which borrows in the mood and emphasis from country style. Elvis felt an affinity to the black community because he grew up in the black neighborhoods in his hometown of Tupelo, Mississippi. As a white Southern boy, he did not see color because they were poor. The Presleys lived the same kind of life as any other poor black family. Poor people in the South, both black and white, shared a common heritage that stamped them as outsiders, and this is very true. I'll talk about another video. Um, Black and white Southerners have a very interlinked common heritage, but I'll talk more about that in another video. Explained Bertrand. The two groups shared similar living conditions, effects of poverty, endurance of scorn, and pursuit of relief. When Elvis was 13, he and his parents moved to Memphis in hopes of better economic opportunities. From 1943 to 1953, Elvis and his parents lived in a government housing project called Lardendale Courts. After that, they moved to a neighborhood in Memphis that was shared by both blacks and whites.
He loved the bright lights. He loved the music in the city. He loved hearing people on the street. He loved listening to music coming from the bars. And he'd study them.
Elvis was a student. As a kid, I would go to the Flamingo Room myself, and Elvis would hang at the Flamingo Room. When you realize that Elvis knew where Beale Street was and knew what that all meant, you could sense that he was different. You walk in the Flamingo Room on a Saturday night or Friday night, you're in another world. It's like a Mardi Gras celebration, except the music is soulful. There was so much color in clothing and dress and vibe, and the music was tremendously upbeat. You're not seeing that for one night. You're seeing that every time you go there.
Beale Street was the black man's haven. When he come here, everything lit up like a slot machine. Everything was fired up. Beale Street was the place.
You go out on your weekend night, and you were African American at that time. You're making small wages. You were in a racially prejudiced time, and you had to have an escape. And the legitimacy of the Flamingo Room experience and the Beale Street experience was something that took your mind totally away from those things. But if you had the right kind of personality and spirit about you, regardless of who you were, you could come in and check out the music.
B.B. King, Rufus Thomas, Johnny Ace, Bobby Blue Bland. You know, these giants were playing little neighborhood juke joints.
Looking at that, you would see how powerful it would be connecting to an audience.
Oh, stop your train, darling. A poor boy ride. Don't you hear me calling?
And so Elvis Presley coming with rock and roll music. At first, it was not accepted. Rock and roll music was called nigger music. White people did not like it. They did not like Elvis Presley. It took a while before all the kids started getting hooked on it. Before it became to be more widely accepted. Before that, it was known as nigger music. White people hated it.
I thought he was a very beautiful, and still is, a very beautiful person, and his memories shall probably forever live on.
Well, you ain't nothing but a rabbit. You ain't no friend of mine.
There is no room in this city for the vulgar performances of Elvis Presley.
It's shocking. I watched him gyrate his legs and swivel his hips. And our parent-teachers group feels he should not be on television.
We've set up a 20-man committee to do away with this vulgar, animalistic, nigger rock and roll bop. Our committee will check with the restaurant owners and the cafes to see what Presley records is on their machines, and then ask them to do away with them.
You've learned anything from the criticism leveled at you?
No, I haven't.
You haven't, huh?
Because I don't feel that I'm doing anything wrong.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog. You cry all the time.
Rock and roll has got to go. And go it does at KWK. We're all through playing rock and roll records. This week is record-breaking week here at KWK. And after this week, no more rock and roll will be played on the air.
So Elvis Presley, he got his style from living among blacks. That's where he learned. That's where he got his style from. That's who he always paid homage to. He never in any way, shape, or form tried to steal it, tried to take all the fame for inventing it or anything. He only covered songs with the permission of those artists. Elvis Presley, he was a student of music. He was a great artist.
Black cats, keep away from me. Take my advice, go shinny up a tree. I've got